We're here with Chris Dobson, Broker Distribution Director at Ageas, to take a sneak peek at the sentiment survey. Hi Chris.
Morning.
The first thing we always ask about in the sentiment survey is rates, and they're always important to what happens in the insurance sector for obvious reasons.
Sure.
What do you think's happened to rates over the last 6 months?
I think classically it varies by personal lines or commercial lines. In the last 6 months in personal lines, in motor personal lines in particular, I think we've started to see signs of some rate strengthening going in. Certainly Ageas started that a few months earlier perhaps than some, but more recently we've seen a trend to those rates increasing steadily. In household, far less so. Very little movement in rates, and that's probably because of the benign weather we've been having this year. And to be honest, unless we had some sort of fairly significant weather event before the end of this year, and I think it would need to be pretty significant, I doubt if we would see much change in that approach in household as we move forward. In commercial lines, completely different, and I think it has been for some years. We're not really seeing any level of rate strength in any of the major classes of commercial business. It is becoming more and more aggressive, and historically it's slightly less volatile than perhaps the personal lines motor market, so therefore you see less rate strength anyway.
Another issue that brokers have been talking about this year, and many of whom think that it's going to have a significant impact on their business, is the insurance premium tax rise. What was your reaction to that?
Quite shocked, I think, and quite surprised. I don't think anybody particularly saw it coming, and it's a reasonably significant rise to 9.5%. I think we can understand the reasons why, but I think it was the level of surprise that perhaps took us back a little bit. The issue is more around the government for some time have been trying to, quite rightly, ensure that insurers can take as much steps to make policy cover and price fairer to the end customer. And yet, rather ironically, this now impacts that philosophy. Certainly, as far as Ageas is concerned, and I know other insurers, we now have to consider very carefully whether we can absorb that cost. And I think it's quite possible that we probably can't absorb all of that cost. And that is now our approach until it becomes live later this year.
And broker consolidation is another huge issue for the sector. It's been going on for a number of years. And we asked brokers, how many broking firms do you think there are going to be in the next 5 years? Yeah. At the minute, it's estimated there's around 3,500, but most brokers think it's going to fall to between 2,500 and 3,500. Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd probably agree with it. I think for some years there's always been the question raised about the demise of the broker, particularly I have to say perhaps the high street provincial broker, which is the majority of those 3,500 or so. Those threats definitely still exist in certain classes, and perhaps for certain types of brokers those threats are a little bit more severe. I would argue that perhaps for those smaller brokers who are focusing very much in the personal lines market, and particularly if it's dominated by motor, are finding it more and more difficult to retain their margins, get their returns and compete in what is a very price-sensitive market, whether that's against the direct writers or the big brand brokers or the aggregators. So undoubtedly there's a threat for them to survive. I would say, however, that this is nothing new, and certainly for as long as I've been in the industry, which is quite a long time, there has always been a suggestion that these numbers will dramatically reduce. We haven't actually seen that because the good ones continue to survive. There is the added risk of consolidation and things like that, but I wouldn't disagree with the sort of numbers that have been quoted there.
That's great. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks very much.
Stay tuned to Insurance Age for our second video, where we take a more detailed look at the sentiment survey, which will be published in November.